Video, I'm going to compare DreamWorks to Sony Pictures Animation. Now, Sony Pictures Animation, I think, is most well known as the studio behind Mitchell's versus the Machines, as well as Spider-Man Into and Across the Spider-Verse. Those are all, of course, great movies, but this studio has done other movies I like as well. They did a movie called Vivo in like 2021. It's currently on Netflix. I saw that one. It actually really managed to get to me emotionally, with the story being told about this guy who at first is in Mexico, really wants to go and see once again this lady who he hadn't seen in a while, but then tragically he dies, so he's not able to go there to see her again. But his monkey Vivo goes on this whole journey in order to get there so he can get to the concert. That does end up happening, and by the end she sings the song that he wrote. Yeah, by the end it really managed to work. It really worked, really worked well. It was like, oh, that this feels really good. Yes, she actually is singing that song. I think Art for Christmas, as well as Pirates, Band of Misfits, are good as well. Admittedly, this is also the studio behind the Smurfs movies. I've only seen one of the Smurfs movies. I watched the first one. It was like, okay, I mean, this movie is fine. It's not like, what a disaster, this is a terrible movie. I didn't really think that, but wasn't very memorable. It's like, okay, sure, glad I've now seen it, but I'm not really interested in rewatching it. I don't really have much to say about it, to be honest. It felt like pretty typical stuff. This franchise definitely feels more kiddish to me. And then you also have Open Season, which again is totally fine, but not really very memorable. I have now seen all the Open Season movies. It's like, yeah, there are worse animated movies out there, 100%. I mean, they are not as bad as Minions, for example, but are the story or characters very memorable in any of the Open Season movies? No, they're really not. I don't find these movies that interesting. The first Open Season feels similar to Rio, because in both cases you have an animal that's raised by a human that then ends up going into the wild. You even have the plot line in there about all the animals teaming up to beat back the hunters. You had that in Rio too, and that's in the first Open Season. So it's like, okay, I'm glad I've now seen these Open Season movies, but I'm not very likely to rewatch them. With the first Open Season, it was like, okay, I know I've seen this movie before at some point, but I don't remember when, so I want to have this movie be fresh on my mind. So I did rewatch it, and it was totally okay, without leaving a particularly big mark. Mitchell's versus the Machines, on the other hand, is an absolutely fantastic movie that very much does leave a big mark. That's one I remember well. It combines it combines animation with a machine takeover plot line. I like how the animation is very creative, the characters are compelling, the story is engaging, you like the journey our characters are on, you like the relationship the family has with each other. None of the conflict feels forced or manufactured. It all makes sense, it feels earned, the action is fun, there's good moments of humor, good dramatic moments that work. With the Spider-Verse movies, they are groundbreaking in animation, especially Across the Spider-Verse, where you just feel like every frame is like a work of art that you could hang. Every frame is like a work of art you could hang on your wall. Plus, the characters are really strong in these movies. The action's a lot of fun. The story is compelling. I like how there's some moral ambiguity in Across the Spider-Verse, where it's not 100% clear who's right and who's wrong. And also, I like that Across the Spider-Verse has a more somber feel to it. You notice that right away. I like the growth you get for Gwen's character in Across the Spider-Verse, especially of like the dynamic between her and her father, especially the dynamic between Gwen and her father, or the dynamic between Gwen and Peter, or dynamic between Gwen and Miles' parents. Yeah, I said Peter. Miles, what I meant to say. I like how you see the dynamic between Gwen and her father, Gwen and Miles' parents. All that works very well. The journey for Peter B. Parker in Into the Spider-Verse is incredibly well done. It's emotionally powerful. Also, from this studio, let's see, you have Angry Birds 1 and 2. Angry Birds 2 is the one I prefer over Angry Birds 1. I like Angry Birds 2. Don't think it's the strongest movie from Sony Pictures Animation, but it's good. And then you also have Surf's Up 1 and 2. Between them, I definitely prefer Surf's Up 1. I like the story that this movie is telling. It's pretty interesting about this penguin that really wants to join a surfing contest. You also have these people that are interviewing the animals, and then you have this one surfer who was thought to have died previously, but then we learn he's actually alive. He mentors our main penguin that wants to be a surfer. So our penguin ends up being in the surfing contest by the end of the movie. I didn't think Surf's Up 2 was that good of a follow-up to the first movie. Overall, the studio has definitely had its ups and downs. The ups are very high. I've talked about DreamWorks in some other videos, so I don't want to talk about that studio too much in this video because I've already said quite a good amount of stuff about them. I think that, like Sony Pictures Animation, DreamWorks definitely had ups and downs. They put out some bad movies, some great movies, some okay ones, or ones that are just good. In a lot of cases of these DreamWorks films, I've only seen them one time fairly recently. There's like 16 of their movies that I actually have seen multiple times. Admittedly, I have watched multiple seasons of television that are connected to DreamWorks movies, so in that sense, I have more of a connection to DreamWorks than Sony Pictures Animation. Between the two studios, which one do I like more? Interesting question. I think I'm gonna go with Sony Pictures Animation in this case, just because I think that their highs are higher and they're, well, not quite as inconsistent as DreamWorks. I mean, part of that is because DreamWorks has put out a lot of movies. You know, they've done 48 theatrically released movies, along with something like Joseph King of Dreams, which released direct to video. So when you have more movies, it's like, okay, there's going to probably be more ups and downs. But I think there is more ups and downs with DreamWorks. So I think Sony Pictures Animation is the studio I would choose. I'll wrap things up for this video.